T. Boone Pickens, are you planning any industry takeovers today?
Dave, no takeovers today. We're working hard on a lot of things, but we have no deal in the mill right now.
Our guest is T. Boone Pickens, known to most people, and he is known as the co-founder of the United Shareholders Association right now. He is also known as a man who has been very active in the corporate world. He is a man who has been associated with corporate takeovers. We're going to be talking about that, what T. Boone Pickens does, how he does it, when he does it, where he does it. And we invite your comments and your calls, and the numbers will be flashed on your screen in a short time. Mr. Pickens, you're in town for another thing that you do, raising funds. You were at the President's Dinner, which, by the way, will be seen later this morning, a complete coverage of the President's Dinner last night here on C-SPAN. Tell us what the purpose of that gathering is.
Well, Dave, that has been developed over time, and we have had actually 15,000 people attend, not at one time, those functions, and have raised over $20 million in the last 4 years. Last night we had 4,000 people there. But the purpose of the fundraiser is to get the funds for the Senate and congressional races, for instance, 1988. The funds that were raised last night will be used in those races for 1988.
Is this a bipartisan situation? Is it for both parties?
No, it's the Republican Party.
This is the Republican Party, a major Republican Party campaign gathering.
It is. It's the biggest fundraiser the Republicans have.
Well, speaking of raising funds, you have raised a few funds in your career. For those of us who might not be as up-to-date as we might be on T. Boone Pickens, how did you get started, and what do you do, and how do you do it, I guess?
Well, you know, I saw the other day in the San Francisco Chronicle where they identified me as a former geologist. Well, I'm not a former geologist. I am a geologist, and I graduated from Oklahoma State University in 1951, worked for a major oil company for about 3.5 years, went out on my own in 1954 and formed the predecessor company to Mesa Petroleum in 1956. And we had paid-in capital of $2,500 at that time. We went public in '64 as Mesa Petroleum, and today we have a market capitalization of about $3 billion, and Mesa is the largest independent producer in the United States.
Well, how did you go on from that to become involved in these other corporate activities?
Well, you know, my job as a CEO of a public-owned company is to do the best I can with the capital I have available to me. For years and years, well, we searched for oil and gas in the conventional manner, which was to do either geological studies or geophysical studies and then go out and drill wells and hopefully find big oil and gas fields. We did that for a number of years and spent several $1 billion doing it, and we were successful. We went to Canada, for instance, in 1959 with $35,000, and we sold out in 1979, 20 years later, for $610 million. We found a major oil field in the North Sea. We found 3 oil fields off the west coast of Australia. We have 47 producing fields in the Gulf of Mexico. So we had a record of finding a lot of gas and oil, but by the time we got around to the early 1980s, it was clear to me that most of the oil had been found in the United States, and I was going to have to think of something else to do. Consequently, we spotted undervalued assets in a public marketplace, which was other oil companies selling substantially below the appraised value of the assets. And consequently, we became large stockholders in some of those companies.
Our guest this morning is T. Boone Pickens, and he is going to be discussing with us the art, if you will, of the takeover, various corporate activities. And if you have any questions, we invite your calls and your comments at the numbers that are being flashed on your screen. The word raider comes up, Mr. Pickens, in your context, and how do you feel about that?
Well, I don't. It's too bad that is the image that a large investor or a large stockholder has in a company sometimes if they become active in the management of that company, which I'm a great believer that stockholders own companies and managements are employees, and that any time a stockholder wants to be heard, they should be heard. And consequently, when you become a large stockholder, try to have some influence on what management does, well, then you immediately get tagged with the label raider.
A company is moving along. It has shareholders, stockholders, if you will. It's making a profit. It hears that T. Boone Pickens and his people are very interested in making an offer to buy it out. Some people, I have read news accounts, some people hear that and they get very, very nervous. They think that bad things are going to be happening. Do they have any reason to fear being taken over? Is there disruption for them, or are there good things for them?
Well, when you say them all the time, what you're talking about is management.
Yes.
And management in corporate America owns very little stock. stockholders love offers for their company. They can make up their mind as to whether they want to take the offer or not take the offer. It's really no different, for instance, than you having a house that you paid $25,000 for, and somebody makes an offer for it for $50,000. Well, that isn't offensive to you as the owner of the house. You may not want to sell it, but still, it's you're kind of like the offer that you've gotten. Conceivably, that offer might be upgraded from $50,000 to $75,000 for your house. That even makes you happier. So there's management without ownership are the ones that generally are offended by any offer that's made for the company. But in all cases, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to have an offer made. It may be just some to try to influence the management in doing some things they had not thought of as far as upgrading the value of the assets.
Our guest is T. Boone Pickens, founder of the United Shareholders Association, and we're going to take our first call to Fairfax, Virginia. Fairfax, you're on the air.
Yes, I have a question for Mr. Pickens. Personally, I think you're a very smart man and probably more compassionate than most people who would be considered corporate raiders. But I'd like to ask you on a couple of takeovers that have taken place recently, how it benefits the American economy. Mr. Asher Edelman took over made a bid on a supermarket chain in California called Lucky Stores. And to the best of my knowledge, in order to stop this bid, or I don't know whether he was successful, but they closed the whole division of Gemco stores, which were like Kmart's, in order to either stop this or either he sold it off. All of these people are now out of work or working at McDonald's that were making livings and supporting their families. And to the best of my ability, the only thing I can think of that this did was line Mr. Edelman's pockets.
All right, sir. We thank you for the thrust of your question. We'll now let Mr. Pickens answer.
I have a little problem with it because I don't know the deal that well. I read a little bit about it in the Wall Street Journal. My question, I guess if I had an opportunity to ask a question back, it would be, why do they close off a division if the division is making money? There's not any reason to close off a division or cut out people's jobs if that division is making money. I don't know what Edelman came out of the deal with. I don't remember when you say he lined his pockets. I don't know whether he sold back to management or whatever. But management that buys a stockholder out at a premium and leaves the other stockholders out on the limb, that management is stupid, and they shouldn't do what they're doing, and the stockholders should take them to task for just that. But so I don't know the Lucky deal.
What provisions do you make for people when you're involved in taking over, using that phrase for want of a better phrase, a company, and you come across the fact that there's a section that isn't doing well, part of the company isn't doing well. Some people, unfortunately, have to be let go, or this is just not a productive aspect of a certain firm. What do you do?
Well, Dave, it's a pretty general question, but management should be actually restructuring their company continually, and they should know those components that are contributing, and they'll tell you, yes, we know that. And we're trying to give a division a chance to catch up, or we're trying to develop something here. That's fine. I have no problem with that. I mean, if the concept is good, there's no problem as far as long-term is concerned as to when that division pays off. You should have a pretty good idea of when that will happen. But a lot of times when a company has a huge cash flow, they're actually not even watching their business close enough, and they do have divisions that are losing money but are being carried along by those divisions that are making money. So I'm very critical, of course, of corporate management in America, because I think they have done basically a poor job. I think they get a C- rating. At the same time, there's some good managers. But the American worker, I believe, is the best worker in the world. I think with the proper leadership, they do an excellent job. But I think the leadership has been lacking in corporate America. Consequently, they're components of different companies. They should have never diversified in most cases. Where you see over the last 20 years, I think that 90% of the diversifications in corporate America have been poor.
In other words, corporations are getting into areas, in your view, that they shouldn't be getting into, and that's not profitable.
Well, the reason I see them going in that direction is because they have more cash available to them than they have investment opportunity. The opportunities are just not there, is what it amounts to. And so consequently, they'll go into things that they have no business in. They diversify. I mean, this can be quantified very quickly. In the oil industry, where I've had 36 years experience. If you look at the major oil companies, In 1984 and 85 alone, they wrote off about $16 billion worth of assets. I think there were mistakes made in that group. They shouldn't have done what they did. Consequently, there were huge losses. That is no good for anybody.
Let's go to Los Angeles, California, and a question for T. Boone Pickens. Caller, you're on the air.
Yes, good morning, Mr. Pickens. I had a chance to listen to one of your lectures last summer at Evanston, Illinois at Northwestern University, and I just want to say I really appreciated what you had to say, and you really motivated me in getting to my career and everything in the finance industry. My question is regarding the new classes of stocks that are being developed with different companies nowadays. Some are developing stocks where you have different kind of voting rights. And for an individual like yourself who is a rater and is opposed to things like that, and as a United Shareholders Association president, I was wondering how you feel about that. In one sense, it's good for shareholders to have more say-so in corporations, but then again, for individuals like yourself, like raters who'd like to take over corporations, I see a problem in that area.
All right, caller, thank you very much. Mr.
Well,
Pickens?
now actually, I'm very much for and have lobbied for that on Capitol Hill and have testified for the SEC that one share, one vote, and one class of common stock is the only way to go. I do not want several classes of common stock with different voting rights for each one of them. That is when that happens, it's very easy to get voting control in the hands of management without any financial risk. If you look at the Fortune 500, for instance, that they have very little ownership, CEOs do, in the companies that they manage. Take General Motors, for instance. You've got Roger Smith. Roger Smith's been there 39 years and owns 35,000 shares of stock. Now, somebody says that's $2.5 million worth of stock. Sometimes Roger Smith is paid as much as $5 million a year. So his stock ownership that he's accumulated over 39 years is only about 1/2 of 1 year's compensation. So the ownership by the managements and boards of directors of the major corporations in America is quite low. I don't want them to set up two classes of common stock where one can gain voting control over the other. And when that happens, that's bad. That's bad for stockholders, and stockholders are disenfranchised from the ownership of the company. So I want one share, one vote is what I advocate.
Our guest this morning is T. Boone Pickens, and he has, among other things, found time to author a book, Boone, and it is available. How long did it take you to work on this book, Mr. Pickens?
Well, Dave, I actually started writing in December of 1985. I have over 700 hours in the book, and I don't think anybody would argue. I had a writer, Jim Conaway, who helped me with it, but I certainly did a great part of the writing and a great part of the editing of the book. But I have over 700 hours in the book, and I completed the book in October 1976. We've been on the bestseller list now for 7 straight weeks. Hopefully we'll make it to the top of that list.
And this is the story of T. Boone Pickens. If people want to know what it is you are about, this is the book.
That's it, and the primary message in the book is that I spotted something wrong with corporate America. I saw it from the inside, and I believed I had a solution for the problems. And I think that's the primary focus of the book.
Let's go to Gulf Shores, Alabama now, and a question for T. Boone Pickens. Caller in Gulf Shores, you're on the air.
Mr. Pickens, I'm just an average American, work for a living, not making much salary, but I really appreciate you people that do make a lot of money in these companies, because I realize a blue-collar worker is not hiring anybody. It's people with money that provide the jobs. And therefore, I'm not for raising taxes on you people. I want the big companies to make a lot of money because that's where we get employment from. But the one thing that bothers me, trying to figure it out, on this South Africa, I think that we probably got flim-flammed when all these stockholders had stock in IBM and these companies down there that were probably making good return on their money. Let these little liberals up there in Congress talk everybody into disinvestment. Now, is the stockholder Isn't that company going to take the loss, or can the company write it off and all of us taxpayers take the loss?
All right, caller, thank you very much for your call, Mr. Pickens.
Well, it's a tough question for me because I don't operate in South Africa, and I read. Probably I'm not as well informed as the person asking the question. My feeling is that I would want to look at those cases case by case and see how many people were being put out of work in South Africa is what would bother me, and whether those plants would be shut down or whether those plants are being sold to South Africans. And it could be that there's not anything gained from what's going on, which is what I think that's about what the man that just asked the question feels, that there probably may be losses there. I don't know. I'm not familiar with who is in South Africa and who's getting out of South Africa, why they're getting out, and what losses they will take.
Our guest is T. Boone Pickens. He's a corporate takeover specialist, and he is in town, having been at the President's dinner last night, a special fundraising dinner for congressional and senatorial candidates, and you'll be seeing that in its entirety later this morning on C-SPAN. Let's go out to San Diego, California. San Diego, California, question for Mr. Pickens.
Yes, good morning.
Good morning.
Mr. Pickens, I'd like you to comment, if you would, a little bit on the Texaco Pennzoil ordeal and what you feel is going to take for this thing to come to a close in regards to someone coming to the table and offering some type of a deal. And also, if you would, comment on the possibility of Texaco being a possible takeover candidate with their market share down so low and of course, a lot of assets.
All right, caller, thank you.
I think you identified it very well when you said ordeal. It's just that, and I think that the American people are getting tired of the Texaco Pennzoil hassle. I would like to see them settle it for two reasons. One, I'd like to see the dividend restored to the Texaco stockholders, and two, I'd like to see the employees of both Texaco and Pennzoil be allowed to settle down and get back to work in the oil business. And as to what will happen, I'm not sure. I thought that a settlement could be reached probably before the lawsuit was appealed in the Texas courts, and I thought that was the best time to do it. Presently, I'm not sure, but I'd say you still probably have a 50-50 chance of getting that lawsuit settled sometime within the next 3 or 4 months.
All right, let's go out to Forest Park, Illinois, and another call for T. Boone Pickens. Caller, you're on the air.
Hello.
Yes, go ahead.
Mr. Pickens. I would like to ask a question about the recent GAF takeover, or attempted takeover of BorgWarner Corporation, and the final takeover of Merrill Lynch. What are your comments about that thought?
Well, I don't know the deal that well. I just have followed it in the paper, and I don't know. I think now I'm going to have to ask my question would be, I think Merrill Lynch is getting ready to do a leveraged buyout on BorgWarner, but I'm not even sure about that.
If there were a leveraged buyout, what would that entail? What would that tell you?
Well, it'd tell me the stockholders probably came out well in the transaction. And stockholders do own companies, and I think that you leave it up to them to decide whether they want the deal or not.
There's been a lot of publicity in the broadcasting business relative to an attempted takeover of CBS by Ted Turner, and there was just Senator Helms and some other people that were threatening a takeover. And in response to that, the company took certain corporate steps, and people are now criticizing CBS and other networks for cutting back in the news division to pay for the hostile takeover attempt. How do you evaluate all this?
Well, of course, Larry Tisch is the largest stockholder now in CBS, and I think the chief executive officer of the company, and has about 25% interest. I know Larry, and I think he's a good operator. I would say that if the evening news had been making money, there would have been no cutbacks. And if the evening news isn't making money, watch out. And I think anybody that's in a division of any company where they have continual losses when they're supposed to be making a profit, and there isn't a time frame set up for them to make money sometime in the future due to some product that they're trying to develop, that be careful, because if you're in one of those divisions, you better get economic, or you're going to find somebody's going to do it for you.
What about the criticism that CBS News isn't like General Dynamics or Ford Motor? It's operating also in the public interest as well as trying to make some reasonable profit, and that there's a criticism today that the profit line is more important than the public interest.
Well, I don't know anybody that ever bought a share of stock in any company. They had only one motive, was to make money. And it's up to the management of the company to be sure the stockholder does make money. Now, I don't think you have to sacrifice anything as far as the public interest is concerned. I think a good, efficient, productive organization can satisfy the public interest and also, at the same time, satisfy the stockholders in the company.
Out to Mr. T. Boone Pickens' native state, Texas. Beaumont, you're on the air. You have a question for Mr. Pickens?
Yes. Mr. Pickens, I'd like to ask you something involving U.S. oil policy. As you know, we're hurting in Texas, Louisiana, Oklahoma, and so on, and we're getting a lot of oil from the old world, the Eastern Hemisphere. My suggestion is that we impose an import fee, but exempt the countries of the Western Hemisphere, Mexico, Canada, and so on, in exchange for free trade with those countries, where we would have an advantage in the markets of Latin America, and they would have the advantage of pumping up their economies, and it seems like everyone would benefit. That's what the Europeans are doing. They have the economic community of Europe. They're benefiting by free trade in their area. Why can't we expand our free trade and help our oil industry and the whole economy at the same time? What do you think of that?
Caller, thank you.
Well, at one point, I think that several people, and I was one of them, believe that you should have a Western Hemisphere energy alliance, which would bring together Mexico, Venezuela, Canada, the United States, Colombia, and others that would work together as far as energy was concerned. I think the weakness to that, and I think that's kind of the same idea that the caller has, I think the weakness to that is that we have friends in the Mideast also. And I think when we start discriminating against some against the others, we better be careful as to what we're up to, because I think it's very important that we keep those relationships in the Mideast.
All right, let's go out to Palm Desert, California. Question for T. Boone Pickens. You're on the air.
Well, it's very similar to the one that you just asked, but you said that you thought that in the 1980s, most of the oil in the United States had been found. In your business, what do you think the future of the oil business in the United States is? Are we going to be continually importing more and more each year, or what do you see in the future, next 20 years or so in the oil business?
That's exactly what's going to happen. We are going to import more oil, continue to do that. There's very little oil left to be found in the United States. There's a lot of oil to be recovered through enhanced recovery. I'm talking about old oil fields now. We can get into actually the manufacture oil from shale, and that will eventually come online too. But as the price for oil goes up, what will happen is that other energy sources will come online. I'm not in any rush today to get out and develop the last remaining reserves that this country has. On the other hand, I think if anybody wants to drill a well, I think that's fine, looking for oil or gas. But the oil and gas business in the United States will be, one, as the price moves up, enhanced recovery will become the real oil business. And second, you can, and there is, gas to be found in the United States. You can explore for it, and you're going to be successful at depths below 20,000 feet. But we have done that, and we did it in the late 70s and the early 80s below 20,000 feet. That will come back again when the price of natural gas goes up to probably $5 a thousand or above. Today, you can get all the natural gas you want for $1.35.
Our guest this morning is T. Boone Pickens, and in addition to being very much involved in the corporate world, he has found time, did find time, a lot of time at one point, to write a book, Boone, Story of His Life. This is that book right here. Is it still on? How's it selling now?
Well, we've been on the bestseller list 7 straight weeks, and it's selling very well, Dave.
You mentioned that before. I wanted to bring that out again. The Congress of the United States, we should mention at this point, is very much embroiled in the trade debate, and the House of Representatives has now passed an amendment to its trade bill that some people attack as protectionist. Some people say it's just what we need to be competitive. It allows the president, indeed requires the president, to slap penalties on foreign traders who are accused of unfair trading practices and building up huge trade surpluses, dumping their cheap products here. The Gebhardt Amendment, Congressman Richard Gebhardt of Missouri, the author of it. What do you think of that proposal?
Well, when I go back, you know, I've been around quite a while now. I'm 59 years old next month. And I have never been comfortable with legislation to take care of these kind of problems. I don't like protectionism, and I believe that corporations and corporate management should sit on their own bottom, provide the right leadership, and be competitive with the rest of the world. Now, I know there are going to be exceptions from time to time, but by and large, I would rather stay away from protectionism. When I go back and look at the one that stands out to me, the steel industry, and see where steel got their first protection in 1968, I see an industry then that was still strong, and if forced to compete, they would have competed. Today, I see an industry that is now weak and continues to lose money. In fact, last year, the steel business in the United States lost $2 billion. I don't, and I lay the primary problem with it is the leadership in those corporations. But second is that I think we've protected them, and it's been expensive to do that.
All right, let's go out to Destin, Florida now, and a call for T. Boone Pickens. You're on the air, caller.
Well, Mr. Pickens just said he was only 59 years old, so he probably does not remember what was happening in the oil business in the 30s. I was living in Michigan then, and I was national secretary for some independent oil dealers in 8 states. And I arranged for purchases for everything that those dealers bought so that they could compete with the national organizations of oil, like Gulf and Shell and things like that. And the salesmen all came to my office, and I made arrangements to buy all the pumps, the decals, the tires, the drums of oil, the advertising novelties, everything that they had so that everything conformed to the same colors and the same idea. It was very successful as long as I was there, and I don't know what has happened to it since. But I think that the oil business is very interesting. I loved the job I had, and I only quit because my husband had moved to a different location.
All right,
I wonder if he has any comments about the oil business back in the 30s.
I really don't. I was born in 1928, so it's if I go back to the 30s, it'd have to be something I read about instead of something I experienced.
Let's remind our listeners that we have T. Boone Pickens with us this morning, a corporate takeover expert. And later this morning, our call-in program will shift to Jeff McNally, political cartoonist. I'm sure you've seen his work in many newspapers, and he will be here for a while this morning. Let us move along now. Let us go out to Las Vegas, Nevada. Las Vegas, Nevada. Caller, you're on the air.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Can I speak to Mr. Pickens?
Yes, sir. Go right ahead.
Is he on now?
Yes, sir. You're on. Go ahead.
Okay. I'm a retired police officer in New York State, and recently, with my check that I get every month, the comptroller of the state of New York stated that please write the governor of New York State and tell him you want to keep the loans in South Africa because we're getting 16% on the money. I want to ask him what he thinks about that.
Okay,
and,
caller.
I also would like to ask him if he knows Mr. Perot of Dallas, Texas, and if he believes in the way he ran his business, where his workers in his firm are highly technical.
I beg your pardon, sir. I've accidentally cut our caller off. I didn't mean to do that. I apologize. And indeed, he was from New York, not from Las Vegas. We're going to get Las Vegas in a minute.
Okay,
Briefly,
as far as Ross
questions.
Perot, I know Ross, yes. I think he's a great American, and I do agree with the way Ross runs his business. Second, as far as the letter from the controller of New York to say that you should write the governor, I believe, was that, I think that was right,
yes,
to keep the 16%. I don't know anything about that, but if I were you, I would consider writing the governor and saying, let's keep the 16% loans.
Let's go to San Diego, California now. And now, caller, you're on the air with a question for T. Boone Pickens. Go ahead.
This is Las Vegas. Am I on?
Yes, sir. You're on the air. And we're in Las
morning.
Vegas. We're moving around the country quite rapidly this morning. Go ahead, Las Vegas.
Thank you. Boone, I'm very interested in your, and it's true, is the total absence of accountability on the part of management. Since the same thing appears to me to be a problem with our great union leaders at this point. Why the heck should not the unions, which own pension funds, which own about half the equity in the marketplace, start taking a more active interest in what management does?
I love the question because I think you're right on target. I think this is the wave of the future, and I look forward to the day that the employees of a company through an ESOP plan take over that company. I think that employee ownership could be the answer to the question. I like the idea.
All right, let's go to San Diego, California now, and a question for T. Boone Pickens. San Diego, you're on the air.
Yes, Mr. Pickens. I was wondering if you could shed a little light on the corporate takeovers in the timber industry in the last few years, such as your Crown Zellerback takeovers and this type of thing, where the larger companies go to Canada and they buy lots of timber holdings, and then they sell cheap lumber down here to force the market down so that companies lose money, so they force takeovers. Could you shed a little light on that?
I really can't help you on the timber industry. I'm just vaguely familiar with the Crown Zellerback deal, and that took place 2 or 3 years ago, and I think Jimmy Goldsmith took over Crown. But I'm just not I'm not knowledgeable about the timber business.
Let's go out to Cincinnati, Ohio, and a question for T. Boone Pickens. Cincinnati, you're on the air.
Okay, I'm from Cincinnati, Cincinnati. I've become, since reading your book, it's very interesting, you know, I like to say, but I've become very interested in the oil business, and I was wondering, like, should I major, when I go to college, I'm planning to go to Stanford, should I major in geology, like, so I can become, you know, better informed on the oil business, but I'm really more inclined into the more numbers, money when it comes to oil, not as much the developing and exploring as you are, but I feel I should have some background on it anyway, so I'm not sure what I should major in.
Well,
okay.
I would be very hesitant to major in geology, even though I'm a geologist. The problem is there are about 2,000 geologists out of jobs right now because the oil industry has come to a grinding halt as far as exploration is concerned. So I would look at, if I want to get in the oil business, I think I would come up through the financial side of the education structure and not go through the technical side.
Let's go back east now to Latrobe, Pennsylvania, and a question or a comment for T. Boone Pickens. Latrobe, you're on the air.
Mr. Pickens, I remember your meeting in out in Texas that the gas men all attended at El Paso. I think it was in 80, 81. I would like to know why you settled with, your company settled with Unocal on an attempted buyout, and what's the status of this suit being brought against you at the present time?
Well, you'll have to tell me what suit. I'm not aware of any lawsuit.
Well, there is a suit being brought against, Mesa, or...
I think that lawsuit you're talking about is Unocal is suing Goldman Sachs.
Maybe that's right.
Yeah, it's not us. We're not a party to the lawsuit.
You're not a party to that lawsuit?
No, Goldman Sachs was actually employed by Unocal, and Unocal alleges that Goldman Sachs leaked information back to Kidder Peabody, and there were certain securities transactions on information that Goldman was privileged to at Unocal. I think that's the lawsuit, and I really have no comment on that. As far as why did we get out of the Unocal deal, is because we lost the lawsuit in Delaware that we had won in the Chancery Court, the lower court, and then it was appealed to the Supreme Court of Delaware, and at that point the Supreme Court of Delaware ruled that the Unocal management could actually discriminate against their largest stockholder, which was Mesa, and then we were forced to abandon our offer for Unocal.
Our guest this morning is T. Boone Pickens. Let's go down to Atlanta, Georgia, and get a question or a comment there. Caller, you're on the air.
Mr. Pickens, I'm one of your admirers. I think you do a great thing for this country. I'd like to comment about our imports, Mr. Pickens. Everybody who's got a foreign car is an advertiser for that company. I had a friend that had a Japanese car, and every time I got in it, he would open the hood, open the doors, and show me the nuts and bolts and how they were put together. And I got a feeling that these people got a slight embarrassment because they have a foreign automobile. if you ask an automobile worker that's got a foreign automobile, you'll usually get a story. Well, I got this from my brother-in-law, and I just couldn't turn it down. Would you like to comment, please, sir?
Thank you, sir.
Well, of course, I'm pretty critical of the of some parts of the automobile business in the United States. When I look at General Motors with 14 identifiable layers of management, trying to compete with the Japanese with 5 layers, it's you know, I mean, anybody can tell you who's going to win. The Japanese are going to win that particular fight. I wish 30 years ago somebody at General Motors had had the foresight to break up the company into Chevrolet, Pontiac, Oldsmobile, and Buick, and then we would have provided the competition internally. I mean, internally in the United States, where we didn't let the Japanese come in and build a car that people prefer over an American car, and that also goes for the Germans too. So we've got to struggle now with the bureaucracies in the automobile industry, struggling against Japanese and German auto manufacturers who are more efficient. Eventually, we're going to build a better car here, and we're going to get our market share back, hopefully.
All right, let's go out to Columbus, Ohio now, and a question for T. Boone Pickens. Caller, you have a question or a comment?
Yes, Mr. Pickens. 2 comments attributed to you I read in Futures magazine that you anticipate oil to fluctuate between $15 and $19 this year, and another you said you would could never foresee $30 oil again in your lifetime. Do you feel those prices still hold true?
No, I don't know where you got those quotes, because I don't ever recall using any of those. Let me tell you what my predictions are for the oil price. I think oil price will go up, and it will continually move up. And in fact, a year from now we'll be up to $22 to $24 a barrel, and 2 years from now we'll be up to $26 to $28 a barrel. And we will at some time see crude oil prices well above $50 a barrel. I think you'll be out near the turn of the century when that happens. But oil prices will continue to move up.
Let's go to St. John, Indiana now, and a question for T. Boone Pickens. You're on the air, St. John's.
Hello, Mr. Pickens.
Yes.
I'm a 26-year-old who inherited a family trucking business. We deal primarily in steel and iron. And if I was going to diversify, what direction would you think I should head?
Gosh, that is a really tough question for me, because my 36 years have been in one industry, the oil industry. And so to give advice on diversifications, I'm sure not the guy to talk to. So you'll have to talk to an expert on that.
What industry in the United States right now, if you could pick a single industry, is most ripe for the kind of things that you're involved in, that needs to be taken
restructured?
Over? Restructured.
Well, again, you know, every deal I've ever been involved in has been the oil industry. And if any company that we ever acquired, we were confident that we could run that company and do a better job than the prior management has done. I can't, again, you're taking a specialist out of his particular field and asking about other industries that would be ripe for takeover. I really don't feel comfortable trying to answer that question.
Let's go to Boston, Massachusetts, and if you have a question or a comment for T. Boone Pickens, go right ahead, caller.
Yes, good morning, Mr. Pickens. How are you?
Good, thank you.
Oh, my question, I guess I must be very honest with you first. I was very skeptical about you and a lot of your takeover businesses. However, as I read your book and read the article in Fortune magazine, I really became impressed with your views on business today. And my question is regarding your quote-unquote the good old boy syndrome in business. And what advice would you have to someone young in business school, ready to enter the business world in dealing with this?
Caller?
Well, you know, what you have today, if you talk to 10 people in a business school, there'll be 8 of them tell you they want to get out and start their own business, and they don't want to work for a bureaucracy. And I think that's probably, I felt the same way back in 1954. That's why I left a bureaucracy at that time, which was a major oil company. I do think it's wise to get some experience there, because in some of these big companies in America, because I think it gives you something that you can always compare to. But if you want to go out and do well, I think I have a simple formula for that. One, get prepared to do well. For instance, if I wanted to play quarterback for the Dallas Cowboys, there's no way I'm going to do that. I'm too old, I'm too short, I'm too slow, and I don't have a strong arm. So no matter how bad I want to play football for the Dallas Cowboys, I'm not going to get a chance to do it. It's the same way in business. You better pick out, I mean, the area that you want to do well, then get prepared to do it. Know you have the qualifications to do it, and then just work like hell. And it's surprising how lucky you get when you work hard.
Let's go out to Chicago, Illinois now, and a question for T. Boone Pickens. You're on the air, viewer.
Yes, good morning, gentlemen. Mr. Pickens, I enjoyed your book very much. If you were going to sell something today, what would you sell?
If I was going to sell something?
Yes, if you were going to start your professional life, what would you go sell? If anything and you were really good at it.
Thank you, ma'am.
A good salesman is the question, I guess. What would I sell?
Yes.
I guess I would, you know, it'd be something in the oil business because that's where my training is, and I think in the past I have been a good salesman in the oil business, so I'd say that's where it'd be.
Let's stay in the state of Illinois and go out to Manassas, Illinois. Viewer, you're on the air.
This is from Manassas, Virginia, if you're speaking to me.
Oh, I am indeed. I'm sorry, I had the wrong state, but almost the right city. Manassas, Virginia. Go on the air, please.
Mr. Pickens, I have a question concerning the use of pension money by people who take over corporations in the United States. As you know, there are many billions of dollars in defined pension plans. It seems to be a common practice that when takeovers occur, that pension plans are shut down and the so-called excess money in the plan is used to help pay for the takeover. Yet an analysis of final average earning pension plans shows that most of an employee's pension is accrued in the last few years of his career, and that the so-called excess money is really advance funding of a big bill coming due for the corporation.
Well, now, we have never used a pension fund in any attempted takeover, and in fact, it has never even been considered. But when you have an overfunded pension plan, the overfunding actually belongs to stockholders. Just like an underfunded plan, the stockholders owe that to the employees that are in the pension plan. But I don't know of any pension plans that have been shut down. I don't know what you mean by that. I have seen pension plans that are overfunded, and those funds pulled out and used for corporate use, which I have no problem with that, as long as contractually the employee or the retiree of the company is amply taken care of.
All right, very briefly, Springfield, Missouri. You're probably going to be our last caller. Very briefly, a question for T. Boone Pickens. You're on the air.
Good morning. Mr. Pickens?
Yes.
Given the choice this morning at this time with $100,000 to invest, would you put it Texaco or Penn's oil stock? Thank you.
There's one for the
there
books.
it is. That's clear enough, isn't it? I believe if that was my choice and I had to make that decision, I'd take Texaco.
Why?
Because Texaco is more undervalued today than Pennzoil is in the marketplace.
Elaborate on that a little bit. How
Well,
can you
Texaco is
suddenly...
selling for about $33 a share, and I would say the breakup value of Texaco must be above 60 and probably not any higher than 70. And today, Pennzoil selling at $76 a share is probably very near the appraised value of the assets.
Very briefly, if you can do it, because we don't have much time left, is the future rosy for this country in all areas, or are we in for some tough times?
I think that the future, I see a better future today if Congress will not take away the pressures that are going to come to bear on managements to perform, to become competitive. If they will not do that, I think we have an opportunity here for corporate America to get competitive again, one, and when that happens, you're going to see the Dow averages go above 3,000. If we can leave things open, free markets, and put the pressure on managements to perform.
Thank you, callers, and thank you, T. Boone Pickens.
We spotted undervalued assets in a public marketplace, which was other oil companies selling substantially below the appraised value of the assets. And consequently, we became large stockholders in some of those companies.
Our guest this morning is T. Boone Pickens, and he is going to be discussing with us the art, if you will, of the takeover of various corporate activities. And if you have any questions, we invite your calls and your comments at the numbers that are being flashed on your screen. The word raider comes up, Mr. Pickens, in your context, and how do you feel about that?
Well, I don't. It's too bad that is the image that a large investor or a large stockholder has in a company sometimes if they become active in the management of that company, which I'm a great believer that stockholders own companies and managements are employees, and that any time a stockholder wants to be heard, they should be heard. And consequently, when you become a large stockholder, try to have some influence on what management does, well, then you immediately get tagged with the label raider.
A company is moving along. It has shareholders. T. Boone Pickens, are you planning any industry takeovers today?
Dave, no takeovers today. We're working hard on a lot of things, but we have no deal in the mill right now.
Our guest is T. Boone Pickens, known to most people, and he is known as the co-founder of the United Shareholders Association right now. He is also known as a man who has been very active in the corporate world. He is a man who has been associated with corporate takeovers. We're going to be talking about that, what T. Boone Pickens does, how he does it, when he does it, where he does it. And we invite your comments and your calls, and the numbers will be flashed on your screen in a short time. Mr. Pickens, you're in town for another thing that you do, raising funds. You were at the President's Dinner, which, by the way, will be seen later this morning, a complete coverage of the President's Dinner last night here on C-SPAN. Tell us what the purpose of that gathering is.
Well, Dave, that has been developed over time, and we have had actually 15,000 people attend, not at one time, those functions, and have raised over $20 million in the last 4 years. Last night we had 4,000 people there. But the purpose of the fundraiser is to get the funds for the Senate and congressional races, for instance, 1988. The funds that were raised last night will be used in those races for 1988.
Is this a bipartisan situation? Is it for both parties?
No, it's just the Republican Party.
This is the Republican Party, a major Republican Party campaign gathering.
It is. It's the biggest fundraiser the Republicans have.
Well, speaking of raising funds, you have raised a few funds in your career. For those of us who might not be as up-to-date as we might be on T. Boone Pickens, how did you get started, and what do you do, and how do you do it, I guess?
Well, you know, I saw the other day in the San Francisco Chronicle where they identified me as a former geologist. Well, I'm not a former geologist. I am a geologist, and I graduated from Oklahoma State University in 1951, worked for a major oil company for about 3.5 years, went out on my own in 1954, and formed the predecessor company to Mesa Petroleum in 1956. And we had paid-in capital of $2,500 at that time. We went public in '64 as Mesa.
Stockholders, if you will, it's making a profit. It hears that T. Boone Pickens and his people are very interested in making an offer to buy it out. Some people, I have read news accounts, some people hear that and they get very, very nervous. They think that bad things are going to be happening. Do they have any reason to fear being taken over? Is there disruption for them, or are there good things for them?
Well, when you say them all the time, what you're talking about is management.
Yes.
And management in corporate America owns very little stock. Stockholders love offers for their company. They can make up their mind as to whether they want to take the offer or not take the offer. It's really no different, for instance, than you having a house that you paid $25,000 for, and somebody makes an offer for it for $50,000. Well, that isn't offensive to you as the owner of the house. You may not want to sell it, but still, it's you're kind of like the offer that you've gotten. Conceivably, that offer might be upgraded from $50,000 to $75,000 for your house. That even makes you happier. So there's management without ownership are the ones that generally are offended by any offer that's made for the company. Petroleum, and today we have a market capitalization of about $3 billion, and Mesa is the largest independent producer in the United States.
Well, how did you go on from that to become involved in these other corporate activities?
Well, you know, my job as a CEO of a public-owned company is to do the best I can with the capital I have available to me. For years and years, well, we searched for oil and gas in the conventional manner, which was to do either geological studies or geophysical studies, and then go out and drill wells and hopefully find big oil and gas fields. We did that for a number of years and spent several $1 billion doing it, and we were successful. We went to Canada, for instance, in 1959 with $35,000, and we sold out in 1979, 20 years later, for $610 million. We found a major oil field in the North Sea. We found 3 oil fields off the west coast of Australia. We have 47 producing fields in the Gulf of Mexico. So we had a record of finding a lot of gas and oil, but by the time we got around to the early 1980s, it was clear to me that most of the oil had been found in the United States, and I was going to have to think of something else to do. Consequently,